Hi, my name is Jose Sayuda, and I am the district coordinator for community schools. I want to thank you very much for joining me today. We have a really short presentation for you. We're going to go over a little bit of the specifics of community schools, tell you a little bit about where we are right now, and a little bit about what happens next. Now, the important thing here is that I am not asking anybody, managers, teachers, classified employees, to do anything right now. Really, this is just about providing more information, doing a lot of educating, getting folks kind of more comfortable with the idea of community schools, what the community schools framework is, what it could mean to our schools, our students, our parents, and of course, our staff. And so let's get started with today's presentation. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all. I believe this is what I need to do here. All right, community schools update session number 1. And let's start off with what is a community school, right? So a community school is this public school that serves grades kindergarten through 12. It's all about inclusive community partnerships that ensure students are learning, as well as developing relationships with our families and our communities. It includes the integrating of support services, collaborative leadership, extending learning time beyond the school day, along with active family and community engagement. So we'll talk a little bit about that in this next slide. So community schools in California is built off of a framework, right? The framework is part of the California Community Schools Partnership Program. That framework has essentially 6 columns of information, but the key one is this. It's the 4 pillars of community schools. And the 4 pillars of community schools include integrated student support. So these are the things that we are doing for students outside the academics during the school day. And this is a really great little graphic because it shows the student in counseling, the kid receiving medical care, students being served lunches, and so on. And so these are all the things that we provide for students throughout the day that could include tutoring during free periods or during recess and lunchtime. It could include organized activities like soccer teams and basketball teams and things like that. So it's all this stuff we're doing for kids outside the school day. We're taking all these different supports and we're integrating them into our school day. Next, we have expanded and enriched learning time and opportunities. And you all know we have a whole department here downtown at the district office whose focus is on expanded learning. And they do a fabulous job. There's lots of opportunities for our students, things like summer schools and extended days at the individual sites, opportunities for school sites to create after-school clubs and things like that. We also have our migrant program, who does an extended day program at some of our sites throughout the school year. And so there's lots of opportunities for our students to engage in expanded learning or enrichment opportunities outside the school day. And with the community schools model, what we're looking to do is to take that idea and to build on it. So not only provide expanded opportunities and to provide enrichment, but to connect the things that we're doing during the day, the academics we're doing during the day, to these opportunities we have outside of the school day. So how are we connecting the learning from our math, our science, our history classes to these opportunities outside the day, right? And how are we integrating our community and our community partners into these additional learnings beyond the school day? So that's just something to think about, right? How are we making sure that our students feel like the world in which they live is fully connected to the school where they spend a good chunk of their life every single year? The third pillar of community schools is active family and community engagement. Once again, we have a whole department downtown here in San Maria Bonita School District who is committed to engaging with families and our community. And they do a really great job. The family and community engagement folks are everywhere. They are at events and activities. They're translating. They are doing lots of things for our parents to provide them opportunities to engage with the work that the school does. It also reaches out to some of our community partners and invites them to engage, whether it's LCAT meetings or whatnot. We really are looking to try and bring as many folks in. The community schools framework, we want to extend that down to the individual school sites so that they are supported in their efforts to reach out to the community and have the community engage in the schools that are right there in their neighborhoods. This could be businesses, it could be churches, it could be small businesses like restaurants or workshops, it could be smaller socially oriented organizations. It doesn't really matter what that organization is. What makes a difference is whether or not that organization has an interest in engaging with their local school. And oftentimes businesses will tell us that they do have an interest in engaging with the schools. They think it's important, they understand it's important, but they just don't really know how to go about starting that conversation. So that's what community schools can help them with. And then the fourth pillar is collaborative leadership and practices. This is all about sharing decision-making, sharing the responsibility of planning and implementing, but also sharing the responsibility for outcomes and for evaluating how those outcomes are reflected in what our original goals or priorities were. Collaborative leadership and practices really brings the whole idea of school site leadership down to the street level or the grassroots level, where sites are provided opportunities to do their own needs and assets assessment, not just relying on state level data or district level data, but really digging into what do our folks at our schools, what are the hopes and dreams that our parents have for their kids? What do our kids feel like they need in order to make them more successful? What are the barriers that we find that keep students from progressing and learning in the way that which we know that they can? And so a lot of that information is found out when you really dig down deep at the street level, and that comes with being more collaborative with leadership and more collaborative when it comes to the practices of leading within our school sites. And so what I've done is I've taken the entire process for implementing community schools and broken it down into 4 phases. The first phase was the application phase. That phase is actually already complete. All 21 of San Maria Bonita schools have applied for an implementation community schools grant through the state of California. Those were all due on February 7th. We actually got them turned in a day early on February 6th. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of slides. Phase 2, once the applications are done, that was a hard deadline. Things needed to get completed by a specific date. Phase 2 is the phase we're in right now, which is our preparation phase, right? It's about education, exposure, and planning. Again, not asking any group of folks to be doing anything right now. Teachers, classified employees, management, whether they're district level management or site management, we are not asking you to do anything different right now, other than just to be open to the idea of learning more about community schools and the potential it has to help transform the school in which you work, the school that is part of the community that your children live in. And so that's phase 2. Phase 2 can be a short phase or a long phase for different schools. Different lengths of time. There is no designated time frame for phase 2. Some school sites will be ready to implement on the first day of next school year. Others may not be ready to implement for another year or 2. That's okay. That takes us to phase 3, implementation. So implementation is really about beginning to put the community school pieces together. What are those best practices that are embedded in the community schools research, and how can we start to make that a part of how our schools function? Again, no school is on any particular timeline. Not every school is going to be ready at the same time. If you're at a school who's more of an early adopter, you're ready to go, you have the bandwidth for it, you have the support for it, great. We're here to help you build that at your school. Those schools that are not quite there yet, that's okay. We're going to be here to help you to do smaller things, smaller projects to help get your feet wet, get you more comfortable with what community schools could mean to your school, your students, your parents, your staff, and then help move you into the implementation phase at the rate in which you're ready to do so. So that's phase 3. Phase 3 is all about implementation. That includes the framework. It includes bringing on community school specialists. It includes creating site steering committees, which we'll talk about more in future community schools updates. And then phase 4, of course, is the sustainability. If we're doing great work, and we can do this great work because we have the wherewithal and we have the funding support from the state to do it, well, what happens when those dollars run out? That's what sustainability is all about. How do we continue to do the good work that we put in place beyond the life of the grant? Now, this slide and the next slide is really just a list of the different kinds of engagements that have been going on throughout the year. It actually started at the very beginning of this year, a little bit towards the end of last school year. And we're talking about engagement with classified employees, either holistically or in subgroups, with certificated folks, parents, site administrators, district administrators, community partners, as well as our labor partner leaders. And so this list right here includes things like 3 meetings or 3 presentations to certificated leadership, 2 meetings or presentations with classified leadership, right? 4 family cluster meetings at our junior highs. And we even have on this next slide, you'll see we have presentations to the San Maria Bonita School District student leadership team, creating video presentations in multiple languages, creating surveys in multiple languages, and really targeting our surveys, really dialing them in so that they're specific to the group in which we are in front of at the particular moment. So all the surveys were really asking the same questions, but the one that we provided to parents in person may be different than the one we sent them through a parent square, may be different from the one that we sent to certificated folks, may be different to the one that we sent to classified folks, may be different to the one that we presented in person at a certificated professional development, and so on. And then, of course, we have our one-on-one conversations with our community partners, as well as a lot of our site leaders. And so that was just us laying the foundation for moving into phase 1, which was the application process. And now we're looking at the grant process timeline. So what happens next? Like I said, our grants applications were due February 7th. They were all submitted on time. They all looked amazing. I am very optimistic that all 21 of our schools will be funded, and we will know for sure in May. So in late May, the State Board of Education will meet. The community school grant applications will be part of the agenda at that May meeting. In fact, it's part of the consent agenda. So they won't speak about the grants individually or even as a group. It will be part of a list of consent agenda items, very similar to what you see with Santa Maria Bonita School District board meetings. Now, you will be able to see the agenda prior to the meeting. And in that agenda, if you expand the community schools grants section of the consent agenda, it will actually list all the different schools that are being presented to the board for approval and the dollar amounts that each of those schools is requesting. And so we'll know whether or not all 21 of our schools are actually going up in front of the board prior to the meeting. Once that happens, once the board meets and the grants are approved by the board, official notification will come down to schools and district leaders sometime late June, early July. You'll get an official letter that will congratulate you on being awarded the grants, what the grant amount is, a little bit of information about that. And then the actual grant dollars, at least that first distribution, should come to our school districts sometime in August at the beginning of the school year. Quick reminder that the grant is a 5-year grant, and it's not all the money up front and you have 5 years to do something with it. It is a chunk of the grant every year for 5 years. And the last two things on this list are the June 2026. This is the annual progress report. So at the end of each year of the grant, the state's going to ask you to complete a progress report. How are you progressing towards implementing the community schools framework at your school site? And don't worry, every site's going to have support in completing this. It's going to be really well integrated into your LCAP and your SIPSA. And so it'll be a document that's required and that will have a little bit of length to it, but you're going to have a lot of support in completing that at your site. And in fact, as we get more into things like community school specialists and so on, you're going to find that a lot of this work is actually not on your plate, but on the plate of others. And so that's the first actual documentation going to be required by the states once the grants are awarded. And then June 30th, 2030. So by June 30th, 2030, all of the grant dollars will need to have been expended. The state does allow some flexibility. So if you get an allocation in August of 2025, you're not required to spend that entire allocation within that school year. You can roll it over to the next year or the next. The state is absolutely okay with that. But as of right now, all the dollars need to be expended by June 30th of 2030 because that's the cohort we are in. There may be extensions on that time. We're not sure yet, and we'll keep you up to date on that information once it becomes available, but that is what we're hearing as of right now. And so from that, we go into like the what's next, right? So we're waiting for the board meeting to occur in May. We're waiting for the official announcements in June. We're waiting for the allocation distribution in August. What are we doing in the meantime? Well, we're really just having conversations, folks, providing information, answering questions, because we want folks to start thinking about shaping your community school roles and your responsibilities. What might that look like as you learn more and more about the community schools framework? And then identifying best practices and determining San Maria Bonita School District viability. What might that look like at your individual school sites, right? Best practices are embedded in the community schools framework. And so it's a really easy document to read. It's really well laid out and really does a very clear job at defining what those best practices look like and how do they integrate with 4 pillars. Then we're also looking at extending relationships with our community partners. Who are those community partners that we already have, that you're already engaging with at the school level? And how can we extend those relationships into areas that we may not necessarily be engaging with them right now? For example, things like community-based lesson design or community-based learning, taking the things that students are learning in the classroom and connecting that to the community in which they exist, along with the community itself. So taking, for example, science that we're learning in 5th grade, how can we take some of those science lessons and integrate that into real world experiences outside the classroom with our community partners? It can mean bringing them into the school or taking kids out into the field, but really providing students with an opportunity to see their learning in a real world environment. And then there's aligning with the action plan. Now we have action plans within our district. These are all built off of the district's strategic plan. How does the community school framework align with that? And is it going to be a lot of work to make that happen? And I'm going to give you a quick little insight or a little precursor to our next session, which is not really a lot of work because the two line up very well. And we'll talk more about that at our next update. And then, of course, there's coordinating of our resources and funding to sustain the impact that we are hoping to generate from implementation of the community schools framework. So that's a lot that we can do as we move forward. This next slide is actually a preview of our next session. As I mentioned, the district's the district strategic plan lines up very well with the community schools framework. So if you look up in the upper left-hand corner of the frame, you'll see a matrix of colors. These 6 columns are a simple breakdown of the 6 different areas of the state's community schools framework. You'll notice that in column B, those are those 4 pillars of community schools that we spoke about earlier. Now, what I've done is I've gone and made this into a bit of a matrix so that every cell within this colored framework has a letter number combination. So for example, commitment to asset-driven and strength-based practices is D1. So I took this information and these matrix identifiers for each cell, and I went through the district's entire strategic plan, and I lined up elements of the framework with elements of the strategic plan. In this case, down here in the lower right, these are the 4 strategies that the district is focusing on. And we notice that these 4 strategies look a lot like our LCAP goals. And these number letter combinations in red are cells from the matrix and how well they line up with these individual elements or these individual strategies that are listed here in the district's strategic plan. And so just a quick snapshot of how well so many of the elements of the community schools framework aligns with the district plan that our district's partners have created. And so giving you a little bit of an idea of how well all this is going to fit together, but also give you an idea of how we can layer the work that's going to come with all of this, that it won't be community schools, LCAP, strategic plan, SIPs, all these things working independently of each other, drawing time away from running your school, engaging with parents and students, visiting classrooms. community school is going to allow all these other elements that we have to come together and to really kind of work holistically as opposed to working independently. And so this is the part of the meeting where I normally would ask if there's any questions, but since there's not an audience here, it's just me and the virtual you, I want to just thank you for watching this. Please look for additional invites to sessions that'll be coming to you. For administrators, those invites will be coming to you in the district update. And the district update will include a title for the next session, as well as a brief description of what that session is going to be. I'm also going to list the sessions to follow in the upcoming weeks, so idea what are the topics we're going to cover. For classified folks and for certificated folks, we'll be sending you emails directly through district email, inviting you to upcoming sessions, along with, of course, the links to the video Zooms. And so thank you so much for spending some time with me. I really appreciate it.